Good evening. Good evening. My name is Angela Rausch, and this is the April General Meeting for Livable Sunnyvale. So welcome all. Welcome who are all in person and all online. And my question tonight, my opening question is, what is something you saw recently and you said, I want to do that? Something you saw recently and said, I want to do that. So, I want to do outdoor yoga. I saw that in the park today. I'm like, I want to do that. I could go around and ask everyone, but you can just put it in the chat if you want. For people who haven't signed in or are on or just watching live, welcome all. So we're going to start off at the beginning with our first presentation, which is Doug Kuntz. And I'm going to let Mike Cerrone introduce him. And Doug, did I pronounce your name right?
Kuntz.
Kuntz, sorry. Thank you. Welcome.
All right. I think I sort of believe everybody knows Doug, but just in case, Doug has a long career as a program manager and product manager in healthcare data in the healthcare data industry, but we don't care about that here. So let's focus on his volunteer activities, and he's been treasurer and president of the Cumberland Elementary PTA, secretary of the Sunnyvale Middle School PTSA. He was a member of the Customer Program Advisory Group for Silicon Valley Clean Energy. He's been a member of the Sunnyvale Sustainability Commission for just over 6 years, but he's here tonight as the chair of the Fremont Union High School District Community Trustee Area Districting Committee, or CTAD, that is advising the district on the transition to trustee area elections. So Doug is here to give us an update on where that stands. Thanks, Doug.
Thank you for that kind introduction, Mike. And glad to see everyone, either online or in the room. So I'll assume that you guys are familiar with the transition to trustee area elections and just give a brief update on where we stand in the process. So on Monday night, the CTAD had our last meeting and selected the final set of maps that will move forward as our recommendation to the Fremont Union High School District's board for their consideration and ultimate final decision at the April 24th board meeting. The maps that we forwarded, we forwarded 2 maps, and it's going to be a total of effectively 3 options for the board to consider. And the reason for that is that for the second map, there are 2 different potential scenarios in terms of what seats would be up for election in 2024, so in November. In either case, whichever map they select and whichever sequencing option they select, the district that will be in North Sunnyvale is going to be up for election in 2024. So I think that's a huge win for the North Sunnyvale community and long overdue. So glad to see that happening. In terms of the maps, yeah. In terms of the maps themselves, one of the ones that we forwarded, if you've seen the maps, is a variation on what was called map scenario 5. So when we presented that to the board at the last map hearing, the what's called population variance, the balance among the trustee areas, was towards the high end of what is legal. It still did pass muster, but it was a variance of 9.7%. So the version of the map that is part of our final recommendation that's going to the board is closer to, don't quote me on this, but in the neighborhood of 5%. So that one's called map 5B. And then the other map that we forwarded, unchanged from the first time that we presented it to the board, is what's called map 6. In terms of how things look for Sunnyvale, the maps are very similar in terms of how things are drawn for that district at the northern end of the city. I'm not going to try and go from memory, but basically there's a line that goes east-west either at Maud or at 101, depending on which map you're talking about, then cuts south along Matilda, and then finally goes exits east-west through the district. I'm going to say in the neighborhood of Evelyn Avenue. It depends on the maps, and have a look at them if you want to see the real detail. But in general, the approach that we heard from the community in our outreach advocated for taking a combination of approaches with regards to North Sunnyvale. First, prioritizing keeping Hispanic and Latino representation as high as possible. And this map, when the demographer try to see what the highest possible Hispanic Latino voting concentration in that northernmost district could be. The absolute highest was 28.4%. This map brings it in at 27.7%. So right in that same range. The approach that we took, though, with a slightly different way having that line drawn for North Sunnyvale, had that district not come as far south. And that was also a response to some concerns that we had heard in the north, that if basically there was more kind of a couple of long skinny districts, that there was a likelihood that you might end up with people from better resourced neighborhoods at or south of El Camino Real, who might end up getting elected to those two seats, and that we might end up with not having representation for the north. So with the maps that went forward, we can have confidence that there's going to be somebody who truly is from North Sunnyvale and ready to get elected this fall. So start talking amongst yourselves and reaching out to people who you think might be a good person to run for that seat, because the district's going to need somebody to stand for election and step up to do a good job and serve the community. I think that's it. Happy to answer any questions.
Can you guys hear me out there? Yes. Oh, thank you, Doug. So one of the comments, it's from Margaret Lawson, and she says how much controversy was at the meeting. And Peggy Brewster is also in the room, and she said a lot. I think she said a lot.
Yeah. Hi, Doug. How are you?
Hey.
You can't see me, but I'm in the room.
I can hear you.
Doug and the rest of CTAD was very diplomatic. They're very calm, in spite of a lot of very angry parents. This time it was the Homestead High School parents predominantly. And I left around 12:30, and I took a quick video of what I was seeing at the time. And the meeting went for another hour afterwards. And there was just a lot of anger about the way the Homestead District was being split up. And they were so disruptive that the committee was unable to actually proceed and respond to their concerns because they were like yelling at them the whole time. It was very unfortunate, and there wasn't any security either. Like Graham Clark was trying to manage everything by having one-on-one talks with everybody, but it was inadequate to say the least. So we're hoping that they kind of beef up that when they do the board meeting, because we can, this is yet another wave of people, a community who kind of just heard about this happening, but it's been going on, as we know, for like 15 months now. Like that's when we have been part of it. But, as Monte Vista and Lynbrook kind of started hearing about it, they got very upset. And now it was Homestead. And that last week, they pulled together a CTAD Zoom meeting that had, well, they said it was over 200 people, but I heard I don't know. I thought it was more like 100. I was not in the room. So there was just
140-ish is what I remember.
Okay. Yeah, I wasn't there. Yeah, so did you have anything else, Doug, to say to that? You guys did so well.
Yeah, the unfortunate circumstance of that meeting was, in fact, the committee was trying to see what we could creatively do to address their concerns, and they were being so disruptive that they made it it totally backfired, because they made it so that we couldn't work and see if there was anything that we could do to fine tune and address. So we ended up having to simply adopt the maps, that we came in with. So that was unfortunate. And the other comment that I would have, I don't think there's probably anybody from that group here, but their approach seemed to fundamentally misunderstand, how a process like this works, in the sense that members of the CTAD are drawn from throughout the district, and any change that they advocated to make needed to be feasible and needed to be something that would attract a majority vote on the CTAD committee. So they needed to not only convince parents from the Homestead area who are on the committee, and actually I live in the Homestead area, but it also needed to be any change that they were proposing would seem fair and attract support from other parts of the district sufficient that a majority would back it. Their approach did not seem like it was one that was going to be pulling in, people from other parts of the district and saying, hey, this seems fair and like an improvement. So not sure what else to say there, other than I'm glad that we have the maps that we do. I do think that they represent a lot of hard work and consensus building on the part of the committee, and I'm proud of those maps going to the board. I think that any kind of effort like this involves a lot of compromises, and as you're trying to factor in all these inputs from across the community, everybody has to give something. And that is what we saw. And those maps contain a lot of compromises, but I really think that they reflect, the given a lot of the kinds of constraints that we needed to factor in, such as legal compliance. They really do represent the truest expression that we can of what we think the high school district should look like.
Yes. Chuck has a
Angela's
question.
muted.
Hold on.
Actually, a quick question. Are the 5A maps up on the website right now, or is it still the old? I was trying to post it in the chat.
Yeah.
I just saw the 5, 6, 7.
I just see the 5, 6, 7 as well. So I do not believe that they were publicly posted yet. So as I mentioned, map 6 is unchanged. And the main thing that's going to be interesting is sharing out that 5A. Most of the changes there are in the south of the district.
So Doug, is again, the next steps, there's just one meeting left, right?
Yeah, so at this point, it's just a matter of adoption by the board. So I hope that, if you support the process, that you don't be a silent majority, but in fact, attend the board meeting, speak in support of the process. If you have a preference in terms of the maps, certainly voice that, whether it's map 5A or map 6. I don't know that name 5A, that label will necessarily, we'll see what final identifier is assigned to it when it goes to the board. And then the other part is like with map 6, if you have any brothers in terms of which of the two districts in the south, because there's one or another that could potentially be run besides the one seat in North Sunnyvale. If you have any preferences about that, that's also something that you should offer comment to the board on.
Okay, Doug, this is Tara. I have a quick comment for you, and that is many thanks for all the work that you and the team have put in and keeping us informed, those of us on the periphery of that, with all the maps, the changes and the updates on that. So I cannot thank you enough for putting in the time and the energy, especially since I'm not one that would ever want to do a map. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Agnes. Can you speak to the concerns that were presented during the last meeting, please? At Homestead, the Homestead parent concerns. Can you talk to what they were?
Their concern was that they said that the Homestead attendance area was being divided up among more trustee areas than other high schools. And the maps, I'm trying to remember it because I'm kind of speaking in general terms about both maps, but in general, the Homestead attendance area was divided among 4 trustee areas, and some of the other high schools were 3, or Lynbrook actually was simply 1. In the case of Lynbrook, that's a matter of it's the smallest geographical attendance area and also the smallest population there, and so dividing that up actually was pretty hard. But in general, not only Homestead but the other high school attendance areas as well are in multiple trustee areas. That's definitely true with Cupertino High School, Monte Vista High School, and Fremont High School. So how much of a, I think that some of the concern was a matter of degree, that it was 4 in the case of Homestead. Speaking from the point of view of looking at the map, oftentimes what constituted that 4th area, like in the northernmost part of the Homestead attendance area, was Peary Park, so like north of Mott Avenue, and if you and west of Matilda. And so if you think about what's there, that's not an area that has many residents, if any. And so, having that particular part, although it was a 4th part of the Homestead attendance area that was in another trustee area, it's more of a symbolic difference than a practical difference. The other thing that I'll mention is that, for example, Sunnyvale School District, when they drew their trustee area boundaries, intentionally made it so that each trustee would have multiple schools that they were, that were in their area of representation from an attendance boundary point of view. And they also made it so that each school would have multiple trustees who could be said to have a stake in making sure that that school was well represented and had a trustee who had more of a direct relationship with the school. So it's in the eye of the beholder a bit, in terms of, there are people who advocate for, well, we want, this is our attendance area and we want our one trustee. Personally, I have a different point of view and think that having a number of trustees on the board who have a direct tie to the people who go to a particular school is a good thing.
Thank you.
All right, are there any other questions or comments? All right, so we can move on to the next. I'm going to be giving a presentation. Let's see if I can share my screen. Oop. Let's see. On some village center proposals that have been some developments that have been proposed at the Lake Haven and Duane village centers. All right, so first, just a quick recap of what village centers are. So Sunnyvale's identified 7 different village centers across the city that are good sites for mixed-use development. And this is a map. Getting back into maps, I kind of like maps, actually. So you'll see a lot of them. So this is a map of where the village centers are. It's all the orange blobs there. So there's one down at the corner of Fremont and Mary. There's one at the corner of Fremont and Sunnyvale, Saratoga. One on Old San Francisco, kind of at Wolf. And then there's one up on Maud, where it hits Matilda, where the kind of Lucky's and some of the other shops are there. There's one on Duane, so that's one of the ones that has the new proposal. There's one on Lake Haven at Lawrence, which is the second new proposal. And then the final one is up at Fair Oaks and Tasman. So what these village centers are, they're places that the city identified for mixed-use development. So they're generally kind of older strip malls. They may be getting a little bit older, a little bit in need of upgrades. And so they identified these as places to build, and the quote from the document was active pedestrian-oriented places with neighborhoods serving commercial uses that are close to residents and are mixed with residential uses. So generally the idea was kind of get retail down on the first floor and then build residential units up above them. And actually, two of the sites actually have developments that are already underway. One of them, actually, the construction is pretty far along. The one at Village Center 2, where Jake's was. But there are two sites that actually already have plans kind of underway. The first one of those, this is the corner of Fremont and Mary. And actually, most of the village centers are on a couple of different corners, so they divide it up into kind of corners A, B, C, and D. At Fremont and Mary, they're actually redeveloping the B corner, which right now is a bunch of kind of single-story office buildings, a lot of dental offices, medical offices, things like that. And they're kind of replacing that. They're putting in 114 townhouses and then a larger 35,000 square foot office building, kind of right at the corner of the intersection there. For the Village Center 2, so that's the corner of Fremont and Sunnyvale, Saratoga. Homestead High School. Fremont High School is the upper left corner of that picture. So it's kind of across Sunnyvale, Saratoga from Fremont High School. What they're doing there is they've actually taken the B corner and they're redeveloping two different subsets of that corner. So the thing in the middle there, that's a 24-hour fitness. And then on the left is kind of where the Longhorn Steakhouse and there's a crepe restaurant and a dry cleaner and some stuff there. That's one that's earlier in the development. I'm not sure if they've started construction on that. And the one on the right is where Jake's Pizza was. And that's the one that's pretty far along in development. All the buildings are up. They've made a lot of progress there. And so that's at those two sites combined, they're putting in 85 townhouses and about 11,000 square feet of retail. All right, so the kind of new developments that have been proposed are for Lake Haven and Duane. And again, those are kind of up in the northeastern part of the city. And so for the Lake Haven Village Center, so this is a picture of what Lake Haven is right now. There's Lawrence Expressway goes across the top of that picture, and then Lake Haven goes down the right side of that. And it's a strip mall there. It's got about 65,000 square feet of retail with a kind of a variety of different businesses there. And what the proposal is, this is the drawings that were submitted to the city kind of with their plans. So they're going to kind of take down all those buildings, and the big section on the left is all townhouses, townhouses and flats. So they're going to put about 100 townhouses in there. They're kind of, they want to extend the path that goes through that neighborhood, which actually seems like a really nice thing. But then over on the right is just kind of a very small retail area. So there'll be 10,000 square feet of retail in those kind of 4 orangish boxes over on the right-hand side. And to give just kind of a little bit of there's a lot of numbers and stuff. 10,000 square feet is about the same size as the Off the Rails Brewing Company downtown. I was trying to find something that kind of matches that just to give people a sense of what the scale is. So if you've been there, it's on Murphy Avenue down by Caltrain. That's about 10,000 square feet in size. So that's about what they're proposing for Lake Haven. Oh. No, 10,000 total. So those 4 buildings total are those 4 buildings total are 10,000 square feet, yes. So each one of those is 2,500 square feet. Yeah, so it's like a small retail store. So if you think of kind of like an ice cream shop, yeah, that's a good example. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and actually, if you have questions and stuff throughout the presentation, feel free to kind of speak out or raise your hand. If someone wants to monitor the chat and the online stuff, feel free to kind of shout out questions as we go along. All right, and for the Duane Village Center, so this is a picture of Duane. So Duane is down on the bottom there. Actually, I'm forgetting what the road up to the right is. But this is a shopping center. There's San Rafael. Thank you very much. Yeah, so there's kind of the bigger building there is the Taj Mahal Market. There's a Filipino grocery there, a couple of restaurants, some other businesses there, and it's about 57,500 square feet of retail. And then the drawings had been submitted to in the plans, at least the latest plans that were on the city's website, is replacing it pretty much with just townhouses. So there'll be 81 townhouses. There's one, they call it a mixed-use building. All of this information is coming from the planning documents that the city has on their website. So it says one mixed-use building. I couldn't quite figure out the details of that, but that I think is that small on the bottom row on the right, that small little building there is a mixed-use building. And from the comments on the website, there's been a couple of different versions of the plan submitted, but on the very bottom right corner, there's a Speedy's Tacos there. It looks like that's actually not being affected at all. I don't think they have plans to do anything with that parcel. But again, that's just from trying to decipher some of the documents that are on the city's website. Oh, is that a different owner? Oh, it's a different owner for that property. Okay, that would be why. Yes, yes. So there's townhouses across the street. You said it was Weisner Park? Weisner Park. Okay. Yeah, so it's pretty much kind of taking everything out and basically putting townhouses in. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
The story level, is it 3 levels?
Yeah, so the picture up in the question was kind of how many stories, kind of what does it look like? I grabbed one of the pictures off of the planning documents, and it was that 3-story building that's shown in the top right corner. So that's the kind of artist's rendering of or the architect's rendering of what they want to build there. There were some other photos in the plans that were submitted, but I think they were all pretty similar to that.
How do you translate the mixed use and retail with that plan?
Yeah, I don't.
And the second part is, where do they relocate the existing stores?
Yeah, so there were 2 questions. One is kind of how do you translate the mixed use? I don't really know. I haven't seen that before in any of the documents. There might be a 1,000 square foot area on the first floor and like a 1,000 square foot studio apartment above it, but I really don't know what that mixed use building is. And yeah, for all the businesses that are there, yeah, there's no room for them to come back to. It's all just going to be townhouses, which was the second part of the question. And so yeah, so that's kind of the big impact of this is kind of looking at across these kind of all these developments that are going on at the different village centers. They're losing retail everywhere. So this is kind of for each of the village centers at Fremont Corners, what's on Fremont, Duane, and Lake Haven, how much retail currently exists there and how much is going to be in the new developments that get put up. And Sunnyvale's losing almost 150,000 square feet of retail space just across these developments. And I think there's still 4 or 5 other village centers that if something similar were to happen to them, it'd be even worse.
Okay, so how much of this extraordinary housing that we're getting is going to be accessible or what will be?
So that.
Are they doing 15%?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So I will say that the housing, we do need the housing. So actually that is good that I'm sorry. So the question was, thank you. How much of the housing that we're getting is going to be affordable and accessible? So yeah, so actually, I do think it is good that we're getting all this housing. We just kind of need to get the retail to go along with it. I Sunnyvale right now has a requirement that 15% of the units that a developer builds fall into different affordable categories, which are units that have limits on how much rent can be charged, and people have to apply to get those. Yeah, it's subsidized housing. And Sunnyvale's current policy is that 15% of the units must fall into that category. Developers can kind of buy out that requirement. They can pay fees to the city in lieu of actually building those. And I don't know for these developments if the developers have chosen to actually build the units or just pay the in lieu fees. And I believe they can actually make that decision fairly far along in the process. They don't have to state up front which of the two they're doing. They can, as the process goes through, they can petition to say, can I pay the in lieu fees? Yeah. Go ahead.
The impact of losing a store that serves all of the North Sunnyvale, the Indian communities and Middle Eastern community is absolutely enormous.
Yes.
And it's tragic. It's not only devastating, but it shouldn't happen. Because if the next on the shopping block is lucky, then we create a total disenfranchised communities without access to food.
Yeah, and then actually that was kind of the
and
next,
grocery.
yeah, and that was the next kind of big thing that was very concerning about these developments is one is kind of losing these retail centers is a huge blow to the communities. And even more specifically, North Sunnyvale is losing 3 of its grocery stores. There's a Chinese market or a New Wan market up in the Lake Haven, and then at the Duane, there's Taj Mahal and a Filipino grocery there. And just to do a comparison, kind of north of Caltrain, there's only, I think, 9 or 10 grocery stores.
Yes, I actually
that
did a
area.
count.
Yeah.
I went on a map and did a count, and I discounted anything that was like a mini mart or a 7-Eleven because I don't count those as like grocery stores. Because I realized that we are definitely a food desert in North Sunnyvale, and I wanted to make the point that the loss of retail space, especially grocery stores, is a problem.
Yeah, so that's going to be a huge loss to the community. And actually, I think Colleen on the Zoom, do you have a question or comment?
Oh, yes, thank you. I was going to wait till the end of your presentation. I think there's something in the ordinance that any redevelopment needs to have, what was it, 10% of retail stay? So have you heard anything about that for this?
Yeah, actually, I'll cover that a little bit later on in the presentation. If you want to hold off the question till then.
Oh, no problem.
I'll
I'll
talk
wait.
about that a
Thanks.
little bit. Yeah.
So this is a topic that for my family living in San Miguel for 70 years has always raised a bit of a bug in our bonnet, if we would say. I think that when we talk about food desert and we talk about, oh, you can just go to Chavez Market. Okay, I can, and I have. But it doesn't provide me the same access that I would get at a mainstream grocery store. And for someone to say, well, you have access to a grocery store, you have Lucky's. I choose not to go to Lucky's there because there's multiple reasons I don't go there, just the parking lot alone. Okay. And there are other parking lots in Sunnyvale that I tried to avoid as well. But the fact is, you shouldn't just say, well, there's something else for you. What if I don't drive and I can't go to Lucky's or I can't go to grocery outlet? The fact is there are spaces here. I just passed it. Fry's lot. What are we doing with things like that? Where are we becoming creative in Sunnyvale? And if you look at what that presentation just shows right there, that slide, it shows that we're not creative. The only place we put a grocery store that's mainstream is along El Camino.
Yep. And actually, a little bit later on, I actually have some examples of other cities, what they're doing in terms of providing kind of building grocery stores. Because often you hear like, oh, there's no possible way we can do that. But there are lots of cities around that are finding ways to do that we can hopefully kind of draw some inspiration from and figure out what they're doing so we can replicate that here.
So, yeah, if we can proceed with the rest of the analysis to show people what we're getting at here.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah. So this is what the village centers were supposed to be, and kind of this is actually a picture of the Fremont, one of the Fremont quarters one. That's kind of what we're getting is kind of rows of townhouses. So kind of one of the questions is just why is this happening? And one of the reasons there's kind of a lot of background here, but the original village centers required some amount of community outreach. So the idea behind the village centers was the developers would submit a proposal, and then there would be community meetings, the city council would meet, and there'd be a lot of back and forth between the developers and the community to kind of negotiate what gets built there. Now, the problem with that is there's lots of cities that have policies like that, and they're intended basically just to stop all development. And so the state passed a law that said, no, cities can't require kind of a negotiation. The cities have to kind of come up with a set of rules. And if the developers meet those rules for the property, then the developer has to be allowed to build whatever it is kind of that meets those rules. And so that was kind of a SB 330, there was SB 9, there was kind of a whole bunch of laws that were passed. But that was passed kind of almost 5 years ago at this point. So that's been kind of on the books and in the works for kind of 5 or 6 years now. And Sunnyvale kind of unfortunately hasn't really updated any of its laws or how they've kind of zoned these village centers to reflect kind of this new reality that we're in. Oh, and yeah, and actually, so SB3, I was talking about some of the cities. There are cities that kind of try to block lots of developments. These laws that were passed is the reason that Valco is getting redeveloped. Up until the state passed these laws, Cupertino would put roadblock after roadblock in front of the Valco redevelopment. And the developers of that property were, after the state passed these laws, were actually finally able to get that project going. So while it has had some negative consequences for Sunnyvale, these laws have helped a lot of jurisdictions get a lot of good developments built. And so right now, kind of the environment is developers need to meet the zoning and any other kind of requirements that the city has defined in their codes. And if the development meets those, all those parameters, then the city doesn't have a lot of discretion to deny that development. And the way that the village centers are currently zoned right now, townhouses are the most economical thing for developers to come in and build. So given kind of the current set of rules that are in place, what's likely to get built at most of these sites are kind of rows of townhouses. So just kind of a quick overview of why that's the case, because it's not really obvious. This is just kind of a generic picture of kind of the type of construction that we would like to see at the village centers. Kind of down on the bottom, there's kind of the first floor, which is these concrete pillars with the wide open spaces that would be used for retail stores. And then up above are kind of the wood framed housing units that are getting built as part of this. So the tricky part of this is called podium construction, and adding that first floor of concrete tends to be very, very expensive for developers. So it's much cheaper for them to just build that wooden portion, which is the housing, and leave out that first floor, which is all the concrete that they have to pour. And so that's why kind of when that comment about it being economically beneficial to build townhouses, it's much cheaper to build just kind of that wooden townhouse top without doing the concrete. But developers actually will put that retail on the bottom if they can build enough housing up on top to make it worthwhile. So if they can add like an extra story of houses on there, as an extra story of apartments or units on there, they'll make more money off of that extra story of units. And once it gets to a certain level, they're like, yeah, we're going to build the retail on there because we can make up all the money by renting out the housing units above it. And so kind of currently how the sites are zoned, they're limited to 18 housing units per acre at all the sites right now. And that's actually, in fact, kind of what's getting built there. So this is a chart kind of with the different proposals, how large they are. So they range in kind of 1.84, which is kind of one of those partial segments of one of those Fremont um, developments up to 5.28 acres for the Lake Haven, which is the biggest one right now. And so for Lake Haven, for example, according to the city, the maximum number of units you can build there at 18 units per acre is 95 units. And the developer is proposing 100, which is a little bit weird. It's a little bit higher. There are some rules that allow developers to get a little bit of a bonus if they do things like build affordable housing or do some other things. So they can go over the housing density a little bit, which most of the developers take advantage of that because they can get a couple extra units out of it. But right now they're building out at about 18 units per acre, which was kind of the maximum that the city has said they could build. But as part of kind of revisiting kind of these village centers, the city actually did go out to developers and ask them, well, if we want to get retail at these sites, how much housing do we need? How much housing needs to be built to kind of make the economics work out for that? And the city did a presentation at a couple of outreach meetings, and they were saying the developers generally need about 38 units per acre before they'll start to consider to build retail. There's another developer I was kind of watching a talk from, and he was saying, yeah, he doesn't even consider retail until they get up to about 60 units per acre. And so both of these are much higher than what the village centers are currently zoned for. But yeah, kind of one thing is you should also probably take that with a little bit of a grain of salt from the developers. They'll always say, oh, well, I have to be able to do this. Otherwise, I just can't possibly do it. So I did a quick survey of just kind of what are developments out there that are getting built in other sites. How much housing is there? How much retail is get building? What are some good examples that we can learn from that other cities are doing? And actually, the first two of these actually came from a document that the city put together. So yeah, so they're working on kind of updates to this village center plan. And in that document, they actually list out, here are some really good examples of what's been done in other cities that is the type of development that we want to see these village centers look like. And this first one is called Madison Place in Santa Clara. It's on El Camino down south. It's either just finishing up construction or it finished up within the last couple of months. I drove by it last fall, and like the bottom floor, they were still doing all the interior of all the retail buildings, putting up drywall and electrical, it looked like. So it's either done or very close to done. This one, the housing there, they're developing it at 41 units per acre, which is pretty close to what the city kind of estimated based on their conversations with developers. It only has 5,000 square feet of retail, but this is actually an incredibly small property. This is on about 0.6 or 0.7 acres of land. It's a very kind of narrow lot. If you would scale this type of development up to something the size of Lake Haven, you'd get about 42,000 square feet of retail out of it. So that which is not quite what Lake Haven was at, almost 60 right now, but it's still much better than kind of what's being proposed right now. And this one also had a little bit of office space, 1460 square feet of office space with it. Another good example that the city was suggesting is kind of this is the type of thing we want to see is it's called the Russell up in San Mateo, which is part of the Bay Meadows development. This one is closer to the 60 units per acre, which is that other number that I had heard from the developer. I couldn't get good numbers on the retail. They had a number of kind of nice retail stores there. I think it's not quite as much there, but they were able to get some retail in with that, kind of burger place, coffee, ice cream, some stores like that. Yeah. Burgers, coffee, and ice cream, like that, you're pretty much set. And then, so then the last one is this one that opened last fall in Menlo Park, which is a really nice development. There was actually just I wasn't able to attend this, but there was kind of a meetup of a lot of housing advocates that actually took place here at one of the restaurants or bars. It's called Springline in Menlo Park. The housing units are actually a little bit low. It's 28 units per acre. But they do have 30,000 square feet of retail. And this property is just, I think it's 6 acres, which is basically an acre bigger than Lake Haven. So it's kind of comparable to what the Lake Haven size development is. But they're able to get 30,000 square feet of retail in there. They got a little Italian market, which is what those pictures in the bottom right are. I think that just opened up recently. But the other thing they did at this one is they put in 200,000 square feet of office space. So office space is another thing that's very profitable for developers to build. So rather than having the higher housing density, they actually made that up with the office space for this one. So those were kind of some good examples of like kind of what other cities are doing in order to kind of encourage this kind of mixed use development. And so what are the things that we can do? So I split this into two parts. One is for the Lake Haven and Dwayne developments. The city doesn't have a lot of discretion right now in terms of what it can approve and what it can deny. If the plans come in and they meet all of the zoning requirements, all the other kind of permitting requirements that exist, the city doesn't have a lot of discretion to deny the permits. But there is an interesting idea that was kind of raised by some of the people here, which was actually setting up a meeting with the developers. So we've had meetings with developers in the past. Some of them are very receptive to community feedback. There was one that we were working that came to give a presentation on their development recently, and his perspective was he wants to build something that the community is going to like and enjoy. He doesn't want to have kind of all these battles with the community and have all this feedback. But unfortunately, there are other developers that don't have that perspective. They're in there it's the property they have. They want to kind of build the stuff up, make the money, and kind of move on to the next project. But it is kind of really a worthwhile thing, I think, to kind of get in contact with this developer and talk to them, see what their perspective is, kind of raise the concerns that have been raised here with them, and see if there's some modifications that can be made to this. So yeah, we can work to kind of set that meeting up and kind of get that process going. If you're interested, I stuck my email address up there. Feel free to reach out to us, and we'll try and set something up where we can start that conversation with them. And yeah, sometimes you talk to the developers and they won't even meet with you. So just to set expectations, a lot is going to depend on who's developing this property and
Okay, so
the-
Nick Garrett is developing the Wayne Avenue one, is that right?
I don't
Yeah.
know.
Okay, so I would love
I'll
it
bring
if
it
you
back to
guys
you.
would
Hold
set
on.
up a meeting like that.
Okay, so the comment was there was that Nick Gira.
Okay, so I believe he's the owner. Nick Guerra, I believe is the
Okay.
owner of it. At least he used to be. And the housing there, we have had some problems with that area because of because there was a bar there that was doing drugs and prostitution and all kinds of weird stuff, and the neighbors had to move out, some of them, because of the sound. The amplitude of the drums were so big that they couldn't hear it so much as feel it. And the kids were not able to sleep and so forth. So we did have some problems on the backside of that. It can also be a problem for people living on the backside if the townhomes block out the sun. Now, it may or may not, it's hard to tell from a rendering like that, whether that's true or not true. So, yes, I would love to have something like that set up. We don't exactly have good neighborhood meeting places.
Yeah, you could
in the
someone actually suggest actually meeting for lunch at one of the restaurants over there or doing something like that, or yeah.
Yes, we have held meetings in the restaurants.
Yeah.
Certainly we have, but it's a little more awkward when you're trying to get a presentation and you don't have the proper,
That's true.
you don't have the screens or the computer links or anything like that. So I think this is extraordinarily important for the neighbors. I don't think very many of them know what is being planned for there. And I don't, I know that many of the neighbors also use that little strip mall for their shopping and their food and their recreation in some areas right across the street. So it can be a hot point for the neighborhood. And so I would, as the sort of official leader of the neighborhood, I would love to have you do something like that, and we could invite the neighbors and have a bit of a discussion on that, because I've mentioned it before, and he said he wanted all homes, and I said, I don't think the neighborhood would really like that if we get rid of all our retail. So I didn't hear a lot of willingness to listen.
Mm.
We have but two mics, so with all the passing back and forth. Anyway, what one of our, within Livable Sunnyvale, what we were hoping to do was like set up a table or something at some of these retail centers and get some of the community emails or whatever it is, so that we can arrange community participation or notify them of what's going on, especially in the Dwayne area and also with the Lake Haven one to so that would be something that we as Livable Sunnyvale could hopefully facilitate, and then get the developers in. So I think going forward, I don't know if we can get one in time for May, but certainly for June we could probably get the developers in to talk if we can arrange to get some tables out there of a weekend or whatever and get people to sign up.
We have a dumpster day on May 6th, I believe.
May 6th? Okay. So, and what is dumpster day?
By the neighborhood association for trash dumping, having dumpsters all over the neighborhood for people to be able to dump their stuff.
Okay, and this is pertaining to the Lake Haven neighborhood, or is this the Dwayne? The Dwayne neighborhood has a dumpster day, okay, on May 6th. And so, yes, that sounds like a good day to get some folks out there and let them know what's going on, maybe with some poster boards from those pictures that you've got there, Chuck, and then try and get them to sign up so that we can show to developers, hey, the community wants to meet you, and we've got 40 people signed up to meet you, so that'll give us more leverage to do that kind of thing. Okay, and so Tara also mentioned there's a schedule for a national night out, and when is that generally? First Tuesday in August, and so we could also schedule something for then. So hopefully, so going forward, we can table there. Right, right.
There are 4 communities along Dwayne that have hosted national night outs last year.
Okay.
So in addition to the one at San Miguel, if you are going to have people, around, I would also recommend you come to our national night out at Snail, because a lot of people do go to that neighborhood.
They're a lot bigger than San
Yeah. And then the other thing also would be to hopefully we can get a foot campaign or something going on with some of the mobile home parks up in the northern part, because they're also affected, even though they don't realize yet, in terms of especially those of us who go to the Lake Haven Center. So,
And as I mentioned to Chuck
yes. And so
As I mentioned to Chuck this afternoon, Snail has a newsletter that is being published and distributed door to door to all of the 1,600 homes in Snail. So use this as a way to put the message out.
Yeah, now
I'm
you said that
offering
was
this.
this weekend was the
So if
deadline?
you submit the articles by the second weekend of each month,
Okay.
it's going to go into the following month. So this weekend, we collecting articles for May.
Yeah.
And the LVNA, the Lakewood also has a monthly newsletter that I think their submission is a little bit after ours, because we always share our articles. Yeah. So make sure to get that in there as well. I have a question. Yeah, I'll share it with you, Leah. Of course, of course. What is the status of this right now? Is this owned by the developers? Like, for example, let's talk about the Dwayne. Is that owned by developers, and the plans are like with the city right now waiting for approval?
So I don't know what the ownership situation is. Typically, there's like the owner of the property, and then they hire a developer that gets the architect to do the plans and coordinates to be like, if you think of like a general contractor type of thing for um, building a house, that may not be the best example. But I don't know what the ownership situation is. It might be that
That's a good thing to look into.
yeah, so that's one thing. But where it is in the process right now is there have been plans that have been submitted to the city, and the city is reviewing them. I think the planning commission, not the planning commission, the planning department is reviewing them right now, and they've sent a, I believe they've sent a letter back saying, no, here's a list of things that are wrong with the plans, and it's kind of going back and forth. I don't have a good sense of, yeah, but
I'm-
yeah.
I'm curious if this is owner driven though, because like we've talked about with the other village centers, they had developers present plans, but nobody's willing to sell. So then they can't do the plans that even if they were approved.
No, yeah. So I would assume that kind of for the plans that have been submitted, they own the land and have all that property. So yeah, like thinking about that one development I showed on at Fremont, where Fremont High School is, there were that kind of the two strips with the 24-hour fitness in the middle. The problem was, yeah, the group that was redeveloping that couldn't buy out the 24-hour fitness property. There's actually 3 separate properties there, and they were able to purchase 2 of the properties, but not the 24-hour fitness in the middle. But I would assume that prior to them actually submitting plans to the city that they've worked all of that out. I would doubt they would. Oh, really? Oh, nice. Oh,
This is round one. Okay, so they get, they do yes, this conforms to, or no, this doesn't conform to general stuff. And this hasn't hit any outreach yet. So it is important for the neighborhood to get involved early in the plan before next year it's going to be approved, right? And then we don't have any leverage. We do now. So, so there's a lot of slippage that can happen between now and the final, but it does require engagement early.
So I just received a comment from Luis Manuel, who is the one of the children of Tia Juana, and he owns the Speedy Tacos, and he says that Dwayne is all one owner, and now he owns Nick. He owns the Speedy Taco property, and he has been pushing for the development for years. So 2 questions. The first one is parking. If we were talking about this on this aisle of the room, there's no mention about parking, or there's no physical graphics about parking. So that would be my first question.
yeah. So
Of course, but then you have the people who live in the apartments and they have 2 or 3 cars, as we have seen in the new development on Awani, on San Eliso,
yeah. So
the
there's
$1 million homes.
yeah that, and there aren't enough spots, and yeah. So the question was about parking. The plans do have the plans for the parking in them. I didn't put those in the slide presentation, but they do have plans for those. I don't know how much it is. The city does right now require a certain number of parking spaces per unit. I believe for townhouses, is it 2? I'm looking to Mike, who happens to be on the planning commission. Oh, it depends on the number of bedrooms and all this other stuff. Okay. Yeah, so there are requirements, but I don't know. We could go look at that a little bit offline and figure out how many parking units and stuff they have. So all that's in the plans, but I don't know what it is off the top of my head.
And then the second question that I have is probably for Livable, sorry, um, apologies.
Yeah, you have to kind of.
My second question is, and this is, please forgive the question because this is my first meeting with Livable Sunnyvale. Have you guys presented the question as to the city, whether it's the commissioners or the elected officials, how can we actually equate the 6 grocery outlet or grocery stores in the North Sunnyvale as opposed to 17 in the South? How do they, how can they remove 3? Have you guys presented this to the city? Did you talk about it?
Yeah, so there's yeah, there's often a comment that grocery stores are difficult to develop. But yeah, I have some ideas kind of some for later on about kind of here are some cities that are actually building groceries and what to do. Generally, there's 2 ways that it seems to be done. One is there's a grocery stores taking over old drugstores or even other old grocery stores where people have moved out and coming back in. That seems one way that communities are actually building out grocery stores. And then there's another way, which is actually building completely new properties. And there is kind of a plan that the city has developed for building out Moffett Park, kind of north of 237, which personally I think would probably be the best opportunities around for getting some more grocery stores in that area. Yes. It's a possibility, and kind of the way that Moffett is zoned isn't, there aren't necessarily requirements for grocery stores. We actually push to get a little bit more requirements for more retail the size of grocery stores, but we're not successful at that. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the, Chuck, so I believe these plans have been submitted to the city, and the planning department is going back and forth with them. These have been submitted as SB 330 developments, so that constrains the number of meetings and the number of, and the time frame that the city can respond. And so the city has sent a letter back saying you don't have enough retail, but you know, on the other hand, if they say, well, we'll have to lose some housing in order if we put retail in, then, you know, that sort of ends that discussion. So, and of course, the city, this is not urban planning. We really don't do urban planning. I mean, we just wait till somebody shows up and says, I want to build a housing here, I want to build a grocery store or whatever. And they, right. So there's no central intelligence saying, okay, we're only going to have 3 grocery stores here and 10 here. It just happens based on what somebody who's trying to make money does. So that's kind of the scenario. And of course, um, you know, nobody thinks retail right now is a good money maker. And if you just think about it, how much housing has gone up in the last 10 years, say, if food had gone up that much or retail had gone up that much, they'd probably be wanting to build the retail, but it has not. So it becomes increasingly, you know, a bad economic deal. So I know, Val, well, you have a question, but Agnes has a comment.
Thanks, Mike. I just wanted to say that I think it's important that communities get together and they talk about issues that face them directly. But I also think it's extremely important for communities to come to council meetings, come en masse and explain your issues. We have had conversations with Sean Mendrin, who is responsible for the village centers, and talked with him about our concerns. He's come to our meetings. They present to council. So I suggest that in addition to meeting, as a community, you come to the council meetings. And we'll support you. But I think we need to rally the community to get in front of council.
I just want to make a comment. There is definitely a need for housing, but I think that the longstanding question is, how do we provide in a community like Sunnyvale services to all, not just the new people that move into the neighborhood? Because I'm not going to sell my home that was given to me by my parents. 70, they bought it 70 years ago. I'm not going to sell my home to move into one of those townhomes. I don't know that anybody, maybe in my neighborhood might do that, But we're talking about folks that will move to Sunnyvale because it's accessible to their work, maybe to the school they want to send their children to. I don't want to like be negative about that factor, that we need homes for people. I'm very pro, what are we going to do about services? How are we going to live a livable life that you have to get into a car? You have to walk miles to get somewhere. You can't always order online. And I'm being serious because a lot of people don't have internet in our neighborhoods as well. So I'm just worried about build all the houses we need. But I'm worried about how do we service the people that need pharmacy, they need haircuts, they need a laundromat, they need exactly all of the things that are in the south part of Sunnyvale. And please don't, and I'm not saying anyone said this to me, but someone has made the comment in the past to me, well, we'll just go across over here to Mercado. You can go to Walmart and did you know that that's not Sunnyvale, that's Santa Clara. Why would I give my money to that city? You know, we've got lots of industry around here that is empty. And going back to my earlier comment, we need to get creative here. And I totally agree. We need to show up for council. Totally. Support the idea of more housing, but let's not bankrupt ourselves of everyone has to get in their car to go somewhere else 3-4 miles away to El Camino.
Yeah, and that's kind of the important question, because I think that is an important worry, which is how do we build the services that the community needs to be productive? So right now, kind of like there's a lot of economic incentives to do, like what Mike was saying, like housing has gone up so fast and it has gotten so expensive. It's much more valuable than retail, right? So there's just basically a huge disconnect there that makes it hard, but we have to figure out a way to do this, and what can we learn? So kind of one of the things I'm interested in is kind of what can we learn from other cities that are doing it? What has been successful in the past? How does the city set up the economic incentives and the policies and the structure to kind of get the services that we need? And yeah, so these are kind of these are just kind of random ideas I had. This isn't an official kind of proposal for what to do, but just some things that people can start to think about. And there was a question earlier on that doesn't the city require retail to be built at these sites? So to talk about that a little bit, right now the city does require that at least 10% of the site is commercial, and at most 25% is commercial. And I believe that commercial could be office or retail. Is that correct? I believe, yeah.
Well, I just know of one at Fremont and Mary. They kept Jake's Pizza and a dance studio, and maybe that's what they call retail.
Yeah, and so that's actually. Oh, sorry. Oh, Angus is here. Angus knows the answer to these questions.
I hear a question about how can we encourage developers to do more density, more retail, and less low density. And it's pretty clear to me it's economic incentives are incorrect here. Property taxes are too low and sales taxes are too high, right? If you want more density, you reduce the amount of sales taxes for retail, and you increase the amount of cost for the land itself to encourage higher density. With higher density, now you approach the level of density required for developers to look at retail developments. So parcel taxes is a nice way to get around land value. The Prop 13's limit on property tax increases. With that, we can get a source of revenue for city of Sunnyvale to subsidize cheaper retail. And with cheaper retail costs, hopefully we can bring in customers from other cities around the region as well.
Okay, so these areas that are being provided for village corners are not big enough for big stores. They're not big enough for a big Safeway. They're not big enough for the Luckies to get their trucks in and out and things like that. And So being an attraction for an outside, being a destination for somebody else on the peninsula or in San Jose, that's not going to happen. That's just not the size or the type. This is service to our communities, our single family communities, as well as the townhomes that have been built and the Irvine apartments and things like that. So this would not be serving external areas. So I think on balance, your economics look right, and I don't think people want their property taxes to go up. I really don't think they do.
So actually, I'll get to the grocery stores in just a second. But just to finish this, there was the question Colleen had about the about how much retail is required. So yeah, currently they require at least at minimum 10% of the area of the property is retail. How this applies to village centers, the city recently, like within the last numbers of months, passed some clarifications on how you compute that 10%. If you think of that Fremont Corners example I gave, where like 2 of the parcels were getting redeveloped and the 24-hour fitness was not. The requirement that, as I understand, that was currently in place when the plans for Wayne and Lake Haven were submitted is that 10% of that entire village corner, so that corner A and B, 10% of that total land needed to be retail. So then the question is, well, if you're only coming in to develop part of it, how do you compute it? And I didn't really follow all of the kind of technical arguments, but the city passed some clarifications recently on how you compute this 10%. I think to get around some kind of weird types of loopholes that existed in the other one. So the short answer is kind of for the current proposals that have been made, I'm not sure what the minimum commercial requirements are, but I think going forward for future village center proposals, it is going to be a minimum of kind of 10% of whatever gets. If you're only redeveloping part of it, 10% of your part has to be retail. You can't use somebody else's retail to count towards your requirement. But that was a new thing that was introduced that wouldn't apply to Dwayne or Lake Haven or the Fremont Corners or things like that. But there's a question like, why is 10% a minimum? The city could say you need to do 20%, and that would actually be a relatively easy thing for the city to do. So what the city is doing with the village centers, to back up a little bit, is they're supposedly coming up with a new set of rules for these village centers. They call them objective standards. It's supposed to happen this year, but it's been delayed a lot. The last I heard is these were supposed to be released in March, and I haven't seen them yet. So I'm not sure what the current status is. But there's some kind of small changes that could be suggested, which is just require more commercial at these sites. The city can come in and say, if you want to develop on this property, you have to build a certain amount of commercial. So kind of bump that up, which would be easy. Another part of these objective standards is related to like the form of the buildings, how tall they can be, what the aesthetics have to help, what the entryways look like. There's a lot of kind of form parts of these objective standards. And one of the concerns is taller buildings, right? Like if you want a level of retail at the bottom, maybe you need to let the developers build an extra story kind of out by the kind of out in the taller building so that you can get retail on the bottom. So there may be some, we haven't seen kind of what the city is proposing for these, but that might be an opportunity to kind of advocate for kind of if you build retail there, we'll let you build an extra story on there. And there was a question earlier too about like how that affects like the neighbors. The city actually did a pretty good job with El Camino of specifying how the heights of the buildings have to step down from the road back to the single family neighborhoods, so that kind of on the roads you can build, I don't know, 4 or 5 stories, whatever it is for El Camino. But as you get closer and closer to the edges where the housing is behind it, you have to kind of reduce those heights so that's not the 5 or 4 story building right kind of on the edge of the property. And to the credit of the developer that was doing the 877 Fremont, they had a lot of discussions with the neighbors on how to do that. So they came up with a design where there's a relatively large office building right on the corner of Fremont and Mary, but then it steps down to much lower heights, bordering all the neighbors there. So there's some things on that that we could advocate for. Excuse me. And then kind of longer term, the city is also going to be changing the amount of housing units that can be built at these village centers. And this is something kind of our group was advocating for a long time. The city currently is committed that by December of 2026, they'll increase it to 30 units per acre, which is something we'd been advocating for a long time. That date is kind of farther out than we wanted, but the 30 units per acre was kind of what we had been pushing for in the original proposals. But kind of reflecting on this, that original 30 units proposal was, we advocated for that amount in the context of trying to get more affordable housing in these units. As you get to the higher and higher densities, you can get more and more affordable housing units, which are very important to get, particularly in the southern parts. One of the things that we're very concerned about is kind of these village centers that are in the southern parts of the city. We need to get some affordable housing down there, so it's not all just $1 million townhomes. So that's where that 30 units per acre came from. But now looking at it in the context of retail, that may not be enough. Like if developers can only build at most 30 units per acre, we may still wind up losing all the retail because they can't build enough housing there. So longer term, that's another thing that we're going to have to address and advocate for when that comes forward. So then on to grocery stores. It's running late, so I'm going to kind of try to go through these pretty fast. I just tried to kind of find some good examples of grocery stores that have opened up over the last couple of years or that are in development. I don't know too much about these, but I think these would be good places to start to look at what have other cities done in order to attract and build out grocery stores. So there's a Lucky that opened up in October of 22 in the Bayview neighborhood, and kind of one of the Chronicle quotes was, "One of San Francisco's most under-resourced neighborhoods, Bayview Hunters Point just opened a brand new Lucky supermarket to give residents the distinct fresh produce and new job opportunities." So in this case, this is actually in a kind of a big, it was a big vacant, not necessarily big, it was a vacant retail space. It was only about 10,000 square feet, which is smaller than a typical Lucky store. Like if you think of the Lucky's at Maud, it's probably on the order of 40,000 square feet. So this is somewhat smaller, but it is kind of a full service. It has kind of all the produce. It probably doesn't have quite all the selection and quite the breadth that a full-size Lucky was, but they were able to get this built out in Hunters Point, which was great. There was another one in Marin City, grocery outlet that opened up there. And again, kind of the quote from that is, "There's a food desert in Marin City, California has a grocery store after a 50-year wait." So they're able to recently, just in March, open this up. And again, this took over a CVS pharmacy. So this seemed to be kind of the common thread, is kind of vacant pharmacy-sized buildings, kind of 10,000, 15,000 square feet buildings, where grocery stores have been able to come in and build them out as grocery stores. Pardon?
We have no pharmacies.
But
north of 101.
Yes, that's yeah, a whole nother issue as well. Yeah, probably that Lucky's does, definitely the grocery outlet doesn't have a pharmacy. All right, so then some bigger things. So Smart and Final actually, just a little bit over a year ago, opened up a new location in South San Jose, and they took over a vacant Lucky store. So there used to be a Lucky's there, the Lucky's closed down, and Smart and Final came in. So that was kind of encouraging, that you hear a lot about the grocery stores moving out and closing down. Even though that's happening for some of them, there are others that are come in and kind of take their place. Actually, there's a Smart and Final not too far from my house that I really like, so I'm a big fan of Smart and Final. But then as far as actually building brand new grocery stores, there are cities around that are building brand new kind of full-size grocery stores around. This is a project in Emeryville that's called the Marketplace Redevelopment Project. It's a much larger scale than what the village centers are. So like the comment earlier, the village centers are really targeted at kind of neighborhood scale retail, not trying to attract people from all over to come into these stores and shop there. It's kind of neighborhood serving retail. So something like this is a much bigger development. It's 674 residential units, 180,000 square feet of retail, and 120,000 square feet of office space. And apparently I can't write numbers. So yeah, those are supposed to be 180,000 and 120,000. They originally were going to kind of have an Amazon Fresh or a Whole Foods come in here. I guess Amazon has currently put the brakes on all new stores, so they're now trying to find a new new owner to lease this. But it's scheduled to open up. I think it was supposed to be sometime this spring is when this development was going to be complete. But so this type of scale is actually probably much more suited to something like Moffett Park, which is a kind of brand new development that's going in that's going to be much higher density than kind of what's at the village centers. But there are places that are actually, this is going to be like, yeah, 180,000 square feet of retail would be a huge amount to get in. And then the other one that's opening up there's another typo on this. This is a Safeway in South San Francisco, not South San Jose. So this is part of kind of another very large scale mixed use development. They're actually building an 840,000 square foot biotech lab building there, which is that big thing in the back. But to go along with that, they're building out a 64,000 square foot Safeway, another 10,000 square foot of retail, and 200 housing units to go with it. And their schedule right now, they've started construction on it, I think, and they plan to open it up in 2025. So again, like getting something like this in Moffett Park would be kind of a fantastic addition to that area. And I think that was the last one. All right, so yeah, are there any other questions or comments? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. The question that came up a little earlier is what is happening with the Fry's empty parking lot next door?
Yeah, I don't know what's going on there, or actually, Agnes knows what's going on with that. All right.
So I'm saying maybe because this may be old news. I had heard probably the last I heard about Fry's was the Fry family is not selling it because there was discussion that perhaps the county would purchase it and we could have a safe parking site. But when last I heard, the Fry's are not selling it. Has anybody else heard anything different? Because I know that was a site everybody had their eyes on.
Yeah, I think that's pretty old news. It's
Oh, it is old news.
It's owned by some family trust, and I think they've been negotiating, but that idea of the county buying it I think is long gone. Yeah, I believe. I mean, there may be some temporary use by one of the neighboring industrial businesses, but that's just a temporary thing. So.
But they're not building.
No. I think they're probably deciding what they want to do. The money is only going up in price, right? So.
Another reason why a parcel tax would help push these people who sit on land and not do anything with them to actually make use of it.
Yeah, and actually that's an interesting idea. I forgot to suggest this earlier too, which is there are some cities that are actually implementing a vacancy tax. So if you have a building that you're leaving vacant, you start getting taxed on it. So that, yeah, to encourage people to not just sit on these properties and just let them sit there so that they go up in value more and more and more, and so they can sell it off later.
Thank you. I also think it's important to think about what type of retail is going into these places. Whenever I look and there's retail on the bottom, it's like the same large chains. It's like Rubio's. I mean, it's tasty, but I'd much rather have a local family-owned restaurant. Like we walk from our house and go to the taco place and all that stuff. And so I really would hate to lose that feel. I feel like that's such a nice feel than having like the same, like, I don't know, like 5 places that are in every single like largely retail built up place.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
I think we'd all like to save our mom and pop shops.
Yeah. All right. So yeah. So then the next steps, yeah, we'll set up kind of send me the emails. We'll set up a meeting to see if we can kind of first kind of coordinate what we want to do, and then kind of as a second step, probably try to set up the meeting with the developers to see if we can make some progress like that. Yep. All right. And I think up next is Gail. Is that correct? Who has an update on the Silicon Valley Hopper Shuttle.
Yeah, there was a meeting March 26th, and we had, it was actually, okay, so let me give you some background. So Cupertino has a shuttle that works in Cupertino, and it also comes to the train station in Sunnyvale. Last year, Santa Clara and Cupertino applied for a grant, and through the state, it's through the California Transportation, and they applied for a grant. They got $8.3 million, and with that $8.3 million, they got rid of all the gas vehicles, and they're now all electric. And now the shuttle runs from South Santa Clara, Cupertino, and it still comes to the train station in Sunnyvale. So I don't have a map, but you essentially can go from Cupertino all the way over to Santa Clara University. So, and from Santa Clara University, you can come all the way to Cupertino. You could also go to the Sunnyvale train station if you wanted. So you can go to Westfield Mall, Santana Row, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so the idea arose because of the students in Fremont High School who are served by the kids in Northern Sunnyvale, and the kids that participate in after-school sports do not have a way home, or not only sports, any activity that's after school. And the kids, if the amount of participation from Northern Sunnyvale, kids participating in after-school activities is lower than any other high school because the kids can't get home. So that's how the idea started. And that was actually, they talked to the mayor last year, and there was an opportunity for the city of Sunnyvale to apply for the grant with the city of Santa Clara. And at the last minute, Sunnyvale pulled out. Anyway, so we had a big push led by C and Livable Sunnyvale and probably some other individuals. We talked to every person on council. We got Mike Johnson of the Downtown Business Association involved. We got the Chamber of Commerce involved, and we got the Sunnyvale, Sunnyvale Community Services involved with the Latinx kids, women. And at the meeting on March 26th, we must have had at least 40 speakers. We called ahead. Paulina called ahead, and we had Spanish translation using Wordly. And there must have been at least 12 people speaking Spanish. Among them were students. There were also a lot of students from Fremont High School talking. Anyway, we were expecting a 4-3 vote, and it turned out that it was 7-0. And Kent, who was very reluctant to do this, is now applying for 2 grants. One is for the EPA, which would probably be VTA would probably be doing that one, and the grant for the Caltrans grant, which is the same one and that might be the VIA. And that's the report. Oh, and the grant opened in late March, and it will probably shut down in June when they run out of funds. So we still need to watch this puppy and make sure that the city gets its act together and actually submits a grant. That's my report. Any questions?
And this is for Northern Sunnyvale Shuttle? Citywide shuttle.
I can't hear you, so speak up, please.
This is for a citywide shuttle, correct?
Yes, it would be all Sunnyvale.
And Santa Clara, Cupertino. Yes.
Well, if it's the SVHopper. If it's the EPA through VTA, it would only be in Sunnyvale.
Hey, Gail, this is Peggy. I just wanted to add on that the vote on the 26th was only for funding, to apply for funding. So once we get funding, hopefully from both sources, there's going to be a lot of decision making that will be made, and I think a lot more advocacy. The biggest argument against is everybody saying, well, what about if we give this service to the people and then there's no way to sustain the funding? And I think one really, well, we had a few really key advocates come in, like the Sunnyvale, the Business Association and the Chamber of Commerce. They kind of alluded to maybe we could help fund, you know, so there's maybe some community funding that we could pursue after we have the shuttle in place and after, you know, the use is kind of verified, as well as the Fremont Union High School District. They sent 3 letters of support, separate letters of support. And we personally, as C, we will be pursuing that, you know, subsidizing all the shuttle use for our high school students, as well as Patrick Aarons came in and kind of talked about how there's money from the, in the Foothill De Anza Community College. They could also contribute. So I think those are all very favorable comments. But there is going to be more advocacy needed once the funding comes in. So we can't relax yet.
It also has to fit.
Thank you, Peggy.
The Peary Park one, so that's already funded and that's going. And I was talking to the VIA provider, and they have applied to like the RFP. And if that's provided by them, that could be the same provider as the Hopper, which would be a very seamless, you know? So that can be used as a pilot, like they've been talking about using it as a pilot for years now. So it can be used as a pilot as well as when we had the funding for citywide. I think she told me it'd be pretty easy to kind of fold them in together.
Oh, Margaret has a question or
No,
comment.
no, I just want to make a comment that
Hold it like
I went to
this.
I went to the first advocacy. Rod Sinks got me there, and I think Linda Sell called me and she said, talk to Rod. So she was supporting it. But to me, the thing that's so interesting to me about this is for once, the city council was nimble. Because you know, the stuff around here goes study session, and 5 years later you find out, oh yeah, okay, maybe we can do this. So that all this advocacy has made such a big difference. And to switch it, and when Kent is against something and have the council support it, that's also really interesting. I saw they did it on something else recently, something to do with North Sunnyvale, and it was the artificial turf. That was another grassroots over in the Lakewood Village parks. That was another great. That was one where the staff said, we want to put down artificial turf, and there was so much advocacy for it that the council said, no, you're going with grass. It didn't work with Fremont High School, the Fremont. yeah, not with the high school district. Yeah. Anyway, I love this grassroots, and I also love it when the city can finally be nimble and do something like that.
Thank you, Margaret. And thank you all for your comments and support and engagement. And that leads me into, we actually sent, part of our bylaws says when we send letters, we need to show them to our membership. And the Sunnyvale shuttle, the shuttle was one. We sent that letter on the 20th for the March 26th council meeting. So thank you all for everybody's support. It's good to see this engagement, this local action. And, you know, there's a saying at the airports. If you see something or you hear something, say something. And I'm just going to plug, that's what we need to do in these rooms is join together. So thank you all for just the variety of comments and people here tonight. I have a few announcements to just let you guys know about what's happening. So one of them is, well, speaking of Kent, he is retiring. I don't know when. Maybe Gail, maybe you know, because June is what I'm hearing. So stay tuned for
Yeah, June. It's June.
a new city manager. Next month, we will have board elections. What we did when we became a 501c3, we staggered our board so that certain people, so that the board wouldn't just change entire hands. So we have 5 board members up for re-election. And we're still down 1 board member. So I encourage anyone who's interested to give me, I'll put my email in the chat. But that's what we'll be doing next month is board elections. Before next month, we are doing a social. So Off the Rails was mentioned as the size of retail. We are actually hosting a South Bay Housing Advocates meeting with some local partners. On April 27th at Off the Rails on Saturday from 12 to 3. And I have a QR code to share with you if you just want to scan it. And I can put, I'm going to give it to Angus because he's spearheading this.
Yeah, so we're doing a collaboration with a lot of the local advocates. We got Silicon Valley at Home, Catalyze SV, South Bay EMB, Seamless Bay Area, Peninsula for everyone, and the list sort of goes on and on. So we have about 9 partner organizations right now helping to co-sponsor this event, and we have a space of 125 booked. One of the RSVP folks is Larry Klein, so yeah, you should all go and meet with our mayor. But please RSVP with the link that's on the email there. That gives us an accurate head count so we don't overflow the venue. Thank you very much.
Oh, Chuck's going to put the invite in the chat. Let's see, what other announcements did I have? Where's my sheet? That we can't do that today.
Angela,
Yes.
Larry Klein told me that there will be an interim city manager before they select it. And then there's also a selection process, which is the citizens, they hire somebody to help us find the city manager, but the citizens. So you might mention to Larry, hey, I want to be on that committee that selects the new city manager.
Oh,
Yeah,
thank you
yeah,
for
it's-
that
yeah,
insight, Margaret.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, I was on the committee to select Kent Steffens, and it was pretty interesting because we had to ask each candidate exactly the same question, and we were given the questions. There was no give and take. And of course, Kent was already assistant city manager, so he was kind of a, what do we call that? Shoo-in, yeah. Anyway, yeah, it's interim first, yeah.
All right, and then I have one quick announcement about next month's meeting. Is that coming up? Yeah, so next month at our May meeting, we're going to be having Silicon Valley at Home is going to be doing a presentation on foundations of affordable housing. Next month is Affordable Housing Month, so you can come learn all about affordable housing, how it gets built, what it is. And we'll post the links for this in chat as well. They're also down in very small font at the bottom left there, if you can read that, or the QR codes. But we'll also put that in chat. And that meeting is going to be on May 1st at 6:30, and also be in this room and also on Zoom. And then we're also, there's also going to be a tour of an affordable housing complex in downtown Sunnyvale. So there's a brand new 100% affordable housing complex right across Matilda from the big downtown buildings called Meridian. So the day after, or actually on Thursday, May 9th, the week after our general meeting, they're going to be having an open house there from 11 to noon. So if you actually want to come tour an affordable housing development, see what they're actually like, show up for that. And they also had asked for an RSVP for that as well. And that's just simply to email the email address that's listed there on the bottom left of this slide, just so they know kind of how many people are going to show up.
And Tara said that only took a decade. So, and it started with a study issue.
Special needs housing.
It also has special needs housing. Great. Okay, good. I don't have any other announcements. Is there any new business or anything that needs to be brought forth? Going once? Twice? Somebody's birthday? Oh.
Yeah, the Earth's birthday.
The Earth's birthday, April 20th, I think.
April 20th.
20th is Saturday.
Yeah, in front of City Hall. And Leadership Sunnyvale will have a booth as well. So you guys will have a booth too, right?
I don't know. That's a good question.
Oh, hey, you might double check.
Thank you for bringing that to our attention. April 20th, Earth Day booth. Okay. Any other announcements or business? No. Thank you all for coming. Thank you. It was good to have local politics, local engagement. Thank you. Have a good night. Bye.